So if you were wondering, this is a session on the cataloger is always right. Not that exactly. And we're going to talk about how UX research helped to build a better linked data editor in FOLIO. I'm Doug Loynes. I'm a product owner at EBSCO, and I'm responsible for the linked data initiative in FOLIO. And this is my partner in crime, Anwar Namakhanov. He's our solutions architect from EPAM, and he's based in Kazakhstan. We're really happy that he's been able to join us for the second year in a row for WOLFcon. And here is our outline. We're going to do a brief kind of summary of the topics or the points that were made this time last year at the Chicago, then explain a little bit of what we mean by the cataloger is always right, learnings from the UX that we conducted, and then how that informed the principles that we then later took to build out the application. Just a short timeline, something about the Sunflower release, and then a demo, an actual demo, okay? So when last we spoke at WOLFcon 2023, there is a link in the presentation to the OLF channel for that. So you can pick that up if you care to. This noodle diagram was brought up. I don't know if we ever found a name for it. You were talking about noodle bowl. I was thinking about fallen noodle. Whatever we wanted to call it was brought out. And some of the key points walking around that diagram, one was about data import. The goal of this application was to be able to import any data of any type. We called out MARC and JSON and so forth so that we could mint new URIs for those newly imported data. Another part was the data management. So we talked about how we were going to build out the Marva editor as the UI for the new application, how there'd be tight integration with the FOLIO inventory, and how there was going to be a separate or distinct feature for actually inspecting the linked data itself through a Graph Explorer. And then finally, we talked about data export, deploying flexible architecture, and we called out being able to feed id.loc.gov and locate for the output from the data graph in MARC, RDF, Unimark, and Dublin Core. So that's what we talked about last year. Okay. And then we also showed our what we called our thin thread. And I think Anwar actually said it was pretty ugly. So we were proud of it, but we had acknowledged that it had a little ways to go. So that's what happened a year ago. And since then, how do we do? Well, on the data import side, on ETL, we now have it working for MARC. We have on the roadmap being able to import other data types. Right now, we've started with MARC for all the obvious reasons, and we're creating URIs for those entities that are created out of the MARC files. On data management, we made a pivot. With the Marva editor, what we ended up doing was deciding to build out and calling it something distinct, linked data editor. That was for a number of reasons. One was that Library of Congress has their Marva editor that they're supporting. It's downloadable. It supports all the formats, and we were in production. So if nothing else, or in development, or nothing else, we didn't want to cause confusion when we're talking about Marva. Is it Marva production or is it EBSCO Marva? We didn't want to do that. So for a number of reasons, we decided to just call it a generic term, linked data editor. But we did absolutely follow through on our ability to integrate with the FOLIO inventory, and we'll be able to show you. And then data export, Anwar will be talking about that, about flexible architecture. The id.loc.gov is not in bold because it's not quite there, but it's definitely on the roadmap for us to be able to get data out to support id.loc.gov, and then export, we're starting again with MARC. Okay. And this is the interface that we'll be showcasing later on, which I don't know, Anwar, what do you think of it? Is it okay? Yeah, thumbs up. Yeah, I think easy 7 on that, and we'll see what you think towards the end. The point of this presentation is how we, in the middle of all this development, we were able to kind of change our perspective on what we were doing, how we were doing it, and in large part to do with in building or incorporating the UX team. So we started out kind of thinking about strictly from a systems perspective, and what the UX team was able to do was to help us really think of it from a cataloger perspective. And these are the two primary folks from EBSCO who made this happen. In fact, we were lucky enough to have Tammy Wolf. She's here. Tammy at the time was with the UX team, and she was a researcher there, and she'd since moved on. Thankfully, staying with EBSCO, she's one of the product owners now for Locate. But at the time, she was part of the team for research, and Shelby Domorowski, fabulous designer. And they led a lot of research work where they conducted surveys. We had contextual interviews with lots of library types and lots of sizes. And we made sure to talk with catalogers with varied backgrounds. So we weren't assuming anything about any catalogers' experience with linked data or BibFrame. And then Shelby in particular was talking about how critical having that direct connection with the end users helped with iterative design. So during these interviews, we were able to say, what about this? What about this? You know, you have 3 choices. Which one is the best fit to what you're talking about? All of that came together to help us, you know, learn and make decisions. So that cataloger is always right. I'm going to just stop here. I'm going to go up. I was thinking of putting a slide here. I think I'll talk to it instead. What we mean by the cataloger is always right is not that we're just taking everything down and just saying, okay, that's what they want. Because if we did that, all we would end up doing is replicating their MARC interface and putting it, you know, on the front end of a data graph. That's not success, right? What we mean by the cataloger is always right is that we were attuned to listening to what their problems were. We were attuned to listening to what works and what doesn't work. We were attuned to try and understand what motivated them to do something or not do something. So from that perspective, we couldn't deduce anything. We had to listen to them very, very closely because at the end of the day, we think that getting them on board is going to be a critical component to making this a successful implementation. So that's when we know the cataloger is always right, listen. So what were some of the learnings that we got? I'm not going to read these. I'm averse to reading things with people who are literate. But you won't be surprised at anything that they love. You won't be surprised at anything that they don't love. This isn't a surprise either that they're evaluated by their productivity. The reason I call that out is that if we were to implement something that would impact productivity, that would really work against your objectives, right? If things slowed down considerably, there would be resistance. And this is the thing that came out over and over about, please don't make me take 10 times longer to get something done. I will talk about this one. What surprised us was that it didn't matter the experience level of the cataloger or their background in linked data. It didn't matter. Almost across the board, they all said, help us, remind us, let us learn linked data compared to MARC. So what that told us was that we wanted to have a design that would help them, you know, learn linked data as they're doing their work. Okay. All right. Oh, one last thing here about change ahead. Another thing that wasn't always articulated, but something that we kind of sense pretty close to the surface was a lot of stress that catalogers, you know, expressed about the change. Some of them just didn't want to change at all. Some of them were saying, you got to give me a good reason to, you know, make it worth my while. Others were really apprehensive, right, about what this means, because for a number of them, they're completely attuned to Mark. And now you're throwing something else at them and expecting them to be as productive. Our observation was change management may be as challenging as the change itself. So helping them understand what you're asking them to do and helping them figure out how to succeed in this new thing that you're asking them to do. All right. So some principles that we adopted. We want to build a cataloging app that does linked data versus building a linked data editor, which is kind of ironic since that's what we called it. But we wanted to lead with the cataloging. And I think that some of the feedback that we got in these iterative design sessions was that where early in the process, we heard people like saying, what's work, what's an instance, where does it go? With the design in later iterations, it was, that makes sense. So we were striving to come up with an intuitive interface for a cataloger, something that they could recognize as cataloging, and then they could adapt to, the labels. So that was a big first principle for us. Don't assume that they know it. Learn from Mark. So what we mean by that is there were a lot of things that the catalogers were talking about why their Mark interface is so efficient. So things like being able to see all the data, in a compact way, very easy way to add fields to a Mark record. Lots of keyboard shortcuts. Those are things that we said, okay, let's see if we can inform our interface from that without turning it into another Mark interface. And then the last one about illustrating the benefits and possibilities of linked data, of course, is speaking to the idea of, there are things you can do in linked data that you can't easily do in Mark. So if we can call attention to that, in fact, creates, value to them, then it's less of a challenge, right? To convince someone to use it, you ideally say they would welcome the change because they see the benefits there. Okay. All right. So front-end decisions, clean, complete display, scrolling, holy cow, right? That's one way to get on their bad side, is having them to search and search and search for something. We had to figure out a way to, and it's not like BitFrame, is on the back of a postcard either, right? We had to figure out ways to provide that clean interface and still be adherent to the standard. The other thing we did was we tried to be clean and explicit and self-evident wherever we could about work and instance. So maybe I should add that is that the scope of the linked data editor right now is squarely on work entities and instance entities. We're not tackling item entities for the first go round. Will be that. So our focus was figuring out that kind of balance and that dance between the two. And we heard from some catalogers that they say the only way I would catalog is that I will always start with the instance and I'll barely touch the work. And others said, don't force me to go down the instance route. I'm going to toggle between the two all the time. So we had to try to figure out a way to accommodate that and make it really clear so they understood where they were. And then the last one was was consistent experience across the FOLIO apps. So I feel like a weather forecaster. Bundle up. The other thing that was real important to us is that the linked data editor should feel like any other FOLIO app. So we need to adopt a lot of the visual vocabulary, that's used in the others, while, having some license to do things that only apply in a linked data environment. So I'll call these out a little bit more when we get to the demo. Okay. So, and now I'm going to hand it off to Anwar to talk about some of the back-end decisions that were made.
Yeah, thank you very much, Doug. I think everyone understands that we can make a lot of business decisions, some decisions about requirements, but we should also make decisions about technology. And here's a list of things we made. Definitely, we should have data in our linked data storage. Because if we don't have enough authorities, if we don't have enough hubs, if we don't have enough BIP records, we cannot extend our linked data storage. We cannot build new resources. We can, but we will have some limits. So yeah, that's the reason why we load data into our storage. Another thing, I hope everyone understands that FOLIO has a lot of flows and business-related requirements around MARC. And we cannot just introduce BibFrame and say, okay, use BibFrame, forget about MARC format. We still need to support MARC and BibFrame. It's the reason why we have these two transformation tools. The first one is MARC to BibFrame Lite, and another one from BibFrame Lite to MARC. Another thing, again, I mentioned that we have linked data editor and we have linked data storage. And our catalogers, our end users, they will be able to work with linked data editor, inventory, and quick mark. So it means that they will have a choice, they will have options, but at the same time, they will need to switch from one application to another. It's why we have this concept which named data governance, which allows to switch from one application to another. I will cover this later. And one more point, it's about future. Of course, we understand that we have linked data editor at this moment, but later we'll have potentially some other editors, some other applications, some other vendors who might want to use our API and get this set of benefits we provide in linked data editor. Yeah, we can go on. Well, that's a pretty simple diagram. Here we have our cataloger. We also have FOLIO, where we have core applications, inventory application, quick mark. And what we're going to do, we're going to introduce linked data editor, and you can also find Graph Explorer, which is something we plan, but we don't have it yet in our development, at least let's say it was somewhere in the scope. Anyway, our catalogers, they can use linked data editor, and whenever they want to switch from linked data editors, they can do this. They can go to the inventories, they can go to quick mark. How it works, we have this concept named data governance. We store information about data source. We know where it's coming from. For example, it can be linked data editor, it can be mark, it can be by mark, I mean quick mark and inventory. And whenever our catalogers open one of the applications, we check some other things, but we also check the source of this record. Once we know it, we can make decisions. Okay, it's possible to manage this record here in this linked data editor. You can move to inventory and quick mark, and vice versa in another application. That's how it works from high level perspective again. I think we can move to the next slide. Yeah, we're saying this again, our end users, they can switch from one application to another. But at the end of the story, our catalogers, they will start their work in linked data editor. And here you can find a couple of concepts. We have backend layer, we have linked data service, which allows to manage records in new format, which allows to get records, update, and yeah, actually by managing everything. We also use search service, well known. I think everyone knows that we have search capability, which is great capability in terms of performance and other things. And we use this capability. We reuse some of the existing indexes, and we add a couple of indexes which are required for linked data editor needs. But it's not enough, it's just the right part of our diagram. What else? Linked data editor cannot live in isolation. Everything we do must be reflected in the other applications. Let's say we create a new resource in linked data editor, it goes to linked data service, it's saved in our database, but eventually we will send everything to inventory and quick mark, so it will become available there as well. And it works in opposite direction as well. If we have something happen in for FOLIO applications, we must reflect this information in linked data world, let's say it in this way. Yeah, I think we.
Could you just clarify that when we're talking about the MARC records, it's both bib and authority?
I think on the right side, in linked data editor, in linked data service, we have everything in bframe format. And whenever we send information to core FOLIO applications, we convert everything to MARC, and FOLIO core applications can ingest this information into well-known format and save everything according to the internal rules of these services and
okay.
and vice versa. We get information manually. Well, another thing, it's about flexible design. We know that the current format we support in UI, that will show everything when we have the session. But the current format we support is just one of the formats. In future, we can have some other profiles, some other types of bframe, other flavors bframe, let's say it this way. But we cannot have all the formats in our database. It's just impossible. Otherwise, it's going to be a huge amount of work, and we will be spending our time, sprints, again, just to have new format. Our decision is to have just one format in our linked data storage. So everything is stored in bframe light. But what it means for us, it means that we have to support some kind of translation layer, which gets data in one format, transforms everything, and saves in the core format we have in our database. At the end of the story, if we have a new format, if we have a new profile, I think we can extend our translation layer, but everything else, the core logic of our linked data storage and services will remain the same. I think that's it.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Onward talked about BitFrame Lite, and previous one talked about build. That's how it's pronounced. Build is pronounced build. And it stands for BitFrame Linked Data Extension. This is part of a rebranding that's going on. So what was known as BitFrame Lite at bidfraud.me is getting a big rebranding, and that's coming next month. And Laura Gonzalez, the product manager of Linked Data, she's right here. She can answer all your questions about build. But it's more than just changing the name. It's improving the that resource that we rely on for the linked data service, simplified documentation, improved navigation, and look at and reading, multilingual content. It's also important that this is an area understood that there are public contributions that are going to be made to build to extend it beyond where it is right now. So it's inviting the public to be involved in the build program from lots of different communities of practice like scholarly communications, archives, and so forth. So so you'll hear more about build, but that's the kind of the root on the back end for how we're going to support linked data in the FOLIO universe. Okay. So the timeline is pretty simple. It's Sunflower for the FOLIO community. That's the general availability release, and that's late March of 2025. That's going to be available for any FOLIO library that uploads or upgrades to Sunflower. We're putting ransoms on there because there's certain functionality on the back end that we need to have in order to support interoperability between the linked data module and the back end. And Library of Congress, no surprise, is leading the effort that has funded this work. They will be planning to go into production with their implementation of FOLIO in May or so of next year, and that's going to be working off the ransoms. So we had to do a little juggling to make sure that the ransoms was going to be able to support their implementation, but for the rest of the community, it's Sunflower. And then prior to that, we had our thin thread in December, an alpha in May, and a beta in September. And I put it up there only to say that this was very much an iterative process. And we were working with Library of Congress, but we also had other pilot libraries, including Spokane Public Library. Robert Roos is right here. His team's been fantastic. We had Grand Valley State University in Michigan, University of Concepcion in Chile, and University of Tadeo in Colombia. They all helped out in significant ways. All right. And then what's in the Sunflower release? A lot of stuff. I'm just leave it there. I'll pause for a sec. I think one that's really important is this one about we're limiting it to monograph records initially. We're going to add, talking about iterative, we're going to add support following the BibFrame standard for the profiles so that catalogers will eventually be able to, pull in MARC record, let's say, not crazy, and they'll be able to load it into a particular profile. Right now it's the monograph, but we'll support serials and sound recordings eventually. But for Sunflower, it would just be monographs. And I think that's the most important thing on there. Okay. All right. I'm going to wait on questions because I want to get to the demo. So let's stop here and pull this guy up. Of course, I have to log in again. Okay. Where is it? And show. Share. Yeah. My kids would be so proud. No, wrong one. Never mind. Where is it? Oh, here it is.
Yeah.
Here we go. All right, now they'd be proud of me. Okay, I think I'm going to have to, rather than punch over, just do it like this. Thank you. So, link data editor. It's listed here like any other folio application. And it's right now it's very bare bones, but it's meant to, take its cues from inventory for being able to search. Right.
Can you
So
control plus a couple of times and zoom in?
Sorry?
You can control plus a couple of times and zoom in?
Well, let me do a search and it might change the problem. Okay. So let's do. Okay. Can you read that or do you want me to? Okay. No. Does that work?
Yes, thank you.
Everything has to do with the minimize the participants.
Yeah. Nothing personal.
And I think you can extend your.
Yeah.
I should be good.
Yeah. All right. Okay. All right. So sorry. Yeah. All right. Do we need to wheel you up? So we just did a search on Absalom by Faulkner, and this is illustrating that we're right out of the gate, we're trying to represent the relationship between work and instance. So we have a work on the top, and then the instances, we don't have a lot of records like this currently, but it's the concept that you're probably all familiar with. As you have instances for a particular work, they would be listed. And that would allow the cataloger to learn, oh, the work covers these things, the instance covers those. You click on, oh my gosh, that's not going to work. I got to do it this way.
You can make it a little smaller.
There we go. So to help the catalogers get more information than what's the default in the search result, we allow them to open up all that we know about the work, the selected work, or all that we know about the selected instance. to give them more context about, is this the right thing or not? Okay. And then from here, they can go into edit mode if it's the right one. So they could either choose edit work or edit instance. So let's just go to edit instance. It's taking the same record from the search results set and loading it into edit mode. And one things we did here that was well received by the catalogers is that we've got the work side by side with the instance. So we've clustered all the things under the work, all the things under the instance. For the instance components of the title, statement of responsibility, provision activity, and so forth, right? And that's all loaded based on the mappings that we made from the MARC record, the original MARC record, to the corresponding resources in linked data. So what we will have for production is to make it even more compact. We'll have the ability to just show those fields that have values and then allow the cataloger to add fields as they see fit to complete their cataloging. So that's on the instance. And then over on the work side, this was another thing that was well received, was that, when you want to toggle from work to instance, the work is always going to be on the same side of the screen. So that's work territory, and instance is that territory. And here are the components that, contributors, notes about the work, and so forth, as defined for the work entity. Okay. So they can toggle back and forth. And like I was saying before, there are some catalogers who say, all I ever do is work on the instance. So they'll do all their work here, and maybe they pass it off to somebody else, or then that person can finish the work. But for the other catalogers who kind of have a different approach, we're giving them the transportation to go back and forth. Okay. All right. One more thing, under the instance, we've added this feature, view mark. You can see that there are other actions that are in the queue, but right now we have view mark. And the reason we did that was twofold. One was that we wanted to build trust with catalogers. So we wanted them to know that, we understand there's an output that they may need from MARC. And what this represents is the derivation from the linked data elements. It's not just taking and having in our back pocket that original MARC. This MARC is derived specifically from the linked data elements that we have defined, right? And we want them to inspect it, and we want them to tell us what's right and what's wrong. Mostly what's wrong with the catalogers. And so that we can improve on the transformation from linked data to MARC, right? We don't expect that to be part of their cataloging, but we think it's critical to get their buy-in that this is a system that they can rely on. Okay, we'll come back to that. All right. I think that's all I want to do there. All right, now I want to show you how we can bring in a record. So I'm going to go to data import, and I'm going to get a record. I'm going to drop it in. All right. So uploading, it should just work like normal, and it does. So I have a MARC record, single title for 100 Years of Solitude. And so I've loaded it up into data import, and now I'm going to use a common job and run it to create an instance in the SRS MARC record. Let's run. And there it is. So that's been loaded. And now I'm going to go, actually, let me get the ISBN to make it easier to find. One sec. That. Okay. And I'm going to go to inventory. I'm going to do a search on that. Okay. And here it is, 100 Years of Solitude. Okay. And it's source mark and it's a monograph. So one of the options that we're going to support for production is when you have linked data permissions and you have a mark record loaded into inventory that's monograph, we're going to give you the option to edit that resource in the linked data editor. So we'll go ahead. And now what's happened is we're transforming that resource. It's pulling it up into the edit form, instance edit form. And from here, the catalogger can continue to do their work, right? I'm going to do one thing so it's a little easier to toggle between the two. I'm going to pull up that. I'm just pulling up a new tab. You can see it's still source mark. Okay. I don't need that. I'm going to keep that. So now I'm just going to do a, oh, that's not what I meant to do. Come on, Doug. I'm going to do a small edit. I'm going to just take that out. I'm going to save and keep any. So all I did was take out the punctuation, right? And I'm going to go back to here and I'm going to refresh. Now that's source link data. So what just happened was that by viewing the title that you pulled into the linked data editor is not an event. It's just you're looking at something like you're browsing the shelf. But when you take a particular action as a cataloger and you save it to the back end, you're making a declaration at that point. And at that point, that resource from an inventory perspective is no longer mark, it's now linked data, right? The other thing that happened was that, and Anwar talked a little bit about this, was that we have another channel coming from linked data to inventory and SRS with a new mark record. And that mark record we were looking at in the linked data, that mark record was passed back to inventory, and that's what's in SRS now. Okay, even though it's source linked data, we still have a mark copy because, you know, operationally libraries need copies of mark, but the source is linked data. First question.
Is it possible to go back to source mark if you?
No. Easy question. Let me, one second, Chris. So I can stand up for this one. So we decided that there were a couple reasons why we didn't want to support that. One was there was this pent up implicit and explicit requirement to help libraries move away from mark, right? And so we didn't want to be in a position where catalogers had their option, however they wanted to do it, because then, you know, some of them would never make the move, right? So, you know, to start things out with mark, you can continue to do mark, but once you pull it into linked data and you want to do it, anything in linked data, then they're saying that that's now a linked data resource and you can continue in linked data. Okay, Christy.
Yeah, I mean, so theoretically, you should be able to have a mark description and a bid frame description. I am very uncomfortable with losing the source mark data in this scenario. So I'm just very curious about whether or not that's required to use the linked data editor. Because there's a lot of data in that mark that is probably going to be lost at that point.
But that's going to be true of any linked data editor though, right? I mean, there's no, everything is going to be transformed and then returned back to mark. Linked data just faces that challenge, right?
Right, so why can't you have the mark record and the bid frame record? I mean.
I think I can help you.
Yeah, go ahead.
So at the end of the story, we won't lose any data. We'll have some kind of additional tables where we'll store what kind of things are not met. So whenever we need the initial version, the source version of Mark record, we
I
can
mean,
get
it's
it.
a different record though.
Yeah.
And you should have access to it in the UI.
What happens if you click on view source? What do you get then? The original?
Right now, the view source, just because of a lot of just limitations about the application itself, the view source is Mark. Right? We are going to have the ability to see, in addition to the Mark version of the record, the JSON up in the linked data, once that's supported.
But the Mark version is the Mark version that's derived from the BibFrame light record that was created, correct?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Oh,
I don't want to derail the
Wait,
conversation.
no, in this case, you actually brought in Mark record and converted it to BibFrame.
Right, but we converted it to BibFrame and then we took some action on it, but the record that's passed back is based off the work that's done in the linked data editor.
Right. I think part of the problem with having two records is, and one's really not a record, is that they can get out of sync with them.
No,
And then, I mean, then you have to find a way to sync between the two.
no, I think that that's fair, but so importing a new Mark record and then saying, okay, my source is Mark, but I want to transform it to this BibFrame light record is one thing, but you know, a Mark record that we've had for 20 years and then transforming that and then I just think I'm very uncomfortable with that workflow. Maybe I just need time to process, but
Years.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
My
Nancy.
question about that.
why?
You have something.
I'm sorry.
That says this was a converted record and how it was converted by what system.
yeah, we have that.
Yeah. I think we store this information, we track everything, what happened with the records, and if we need any additional audit information, we can extend it here.
Preference to call it, see if it's up.
It's a good question, but what's behind the question, Nancy? What do you want to do with that information?
I think it partly addresses something from Christie in that, I mean, we say it's source linked data, but actually the original source was Mark. And
Right,
that's telling you that, okay, we've made this now source linked data, but it was once source Mark and if in further times of BibFrame when things it looks a little odd, you know why, because it was done by this particular transformation.
Mhm.
You know,
Okay,
But here's the thing, when we transform a record, we don't lose anything. I understand that we might have some risk of losing data, but the whole habit is just changing the source.
I don't know, I think it's good data management personally to say where it can. I agree.
that's, sorry. Tatiana,
Yes, my question is about the URIs, because when you transform Mark in BibFrame, the first thing that you should do is apply a new URI to each element. I understand that you still don't have the feature to extract MDF. Yes, this is correct. But is a next step. But I expect to have at least a mark enriched with the URI or a URI visible in a certain position. If you don't show a URI, the question is you have in any case URIs behind the scene in the linked data editor, in the linked data storage?
In storage.
Or no?
it will be in the storage.
Yeah, that's the concept of our graph, everything is linked, so yeah, we have such things and we can generate URLs, great.
Yeah, also, if there's anything that would be equivalent to like an authority link in the subfield 0 or subfield 1, you would see that in the Mark version of the description.
You have any other
Yeah,
questions?
so eventually, it will be possible to see all the different versions. So the original version, the transformed one, and then the retransformed one, all juxtaposed to each other. Is that true?
No, that's not the goal, is to preserve like the original and not untouched. That's not what we're doing. We're transforming the Mark record that came in, making it available in linked data, make changes to that, and then we'll have a Mark version of that, but we're not and that would replace the original version.
Right.
Right.
And what happens when I export this particular transformed record now? How would it look? When I export it to, let's say, my desktop or whatever.
Right. Well, the closest we have right here, this would be the MARC record that you'd be using
So
in
that's
your.
not the one that I transformed it into, right?
It is,
Oh, it is.
but no, it's the version that's coming out of linked data.
Yes.
So it wasn't the
So it's
original MARC.
retransformed, right?
No, there's well, there's one transformation from the original MARC
Yeah. And
into
this
the linked data,
transformed-
and then from linked data back into MARC.
Okay.
So they're not identical.
Exactly. But it's not possible, at least at this point, it isn't, to export the RDF.
Not yet. That's on our roadmap.
Okay.
Okay, one sec. I think you were, yeah.
Matis Prostos from the National Library of Finland. You mentioned there being support for other flavors of BFrame, and I very much appreciate the sort of the emphasis on usability and the user experience. But what happens if I don't know, if you want to use, let's say, Shavidi Opus in the system, and since the whole UI was sort of focused on the work and instance, is it all going to are you going to lose all the good work you've done with the usability if you introduce the theme there as an opus, for example, or a hub or whatever?
Well, I mean, to say that a library could use both shared BDE and the linked data editor, is that what you're talking about?
No, I mean, if you use the Chevy data model.
Oh,
or
the
if you
data model.
want to use
Right,
the
right.
opus with this editor
Right,
Or hub.
or hub.
right.
Yeah,
So we're working on hubs as well. That's going to be, we're working very closely with Library of Congress on that right now, so that you'll have the ability to look up the hubs that are currently available through id.loc.gov. But that's an extensible model too. So that's what we think is the strength of the flexibility of using this approach, is to accommodate different models.
I mean, sort of the user experience, that
Yeah.
it changes quite a bit from what you've shown, and I very much appreciate the thoughts behind it, that the work is always on the left and
Right.
and these things that
Mhm.
switching, and that all seem very good.
Right.
But
Well, I think, again, what we're trying to do is to help libraries onboard their staff. So I think that's behind. All right. Christy's been waiting, and Andreas, and all right.
One of my biggest concerns is thinking about like onboarding, but maybe onboarding too early, because if we start losing that marked data, I mean, I think that we want to have some experience and some evaluation of the transformation process and let that mature before we actually commit to our production data being replaced in that way. So to that end, I'm wondering if there isn't, can you say use this for new, as a way of generating new native BibFrame like, but lock your old marks that it can't be like edited and updated?
I don't know if you need to lock it, but yes, you can decide not to transform your legacy and just say.
But as an institution, I mean,
Yeah.
you can manage that, yeah.
I mean, we just saw, uploading a single mark record and being able to play with it, right? We just had an import, data import, and we brought in a new record, right? You could do that with test data or data that you're receiving from a vendor. Is that what you're talking about?
I think she's saying original description versus.
Oh, original description?
Yeah, of course, yes, that's totally possible, but we're running out of time. Can we move on to the next questions?
Yeah.
And we also have questions in Zoom.
Oh,
4 questions.
okay.
Sorry, I might have missed something, I run out of it, but how much will it be configurable? What happens when you click the button edit in the linked data editor? If you're, for instance, using an external editor such as Libris or Zenopia or ShareBD, will this be configurable, or are you always limited to the in-app interaction? You
Andreas,
know I would ask
You
that.
know the answer already.
I know, but I wanted to say it.
We might extend.
So, I mean, we agree, that needs to be configurable, right?
Thank you.
So, absolutely.
Will it be in Sunflower or in Rust? When will this happen?
I can't say when it will happen, you know it needs to happen. Right, it can't be limited to just a single application, I totally agree with that. So you need to give options to the libraries, so it should work the same way like you just expressed. Instead of edit link data, editing linkers should add. Yeah, totally agree.
Where will the link?
You have me on record, right? Alright, and then Nancy, and then go over here.
I just want to say, you can only sit here to do catalogers for so long. How about everybody else that's been working on it for years that doesn't need to have a learning experience, but wants to actually work? I mean, every time we introduce something here, it's like, so catalogers can learn, give catalogers this learning experience, but we have to get over that hump. And there's plenty of people who are already over that hump.
And there are tools for those, right? I mean, we made a decision to, based on what we heard from the catalogers, right? It wasn't.
There are many catalogers. I mean, the catalogers, your catalogers that you asked, yes.
And based on that, we made a decision that this was, you know, the approach we want to take to help them as a group move. And the adoption, I mean, we'll see if that's the, right.
I just want to add that this application is serving more than just formally trained catalogers. It has to serve technicians. It has to serve those in public libraries who aren't formally trained catalogers. So we have a really diverse user base that it needs to serve.
We have some online questions.
Yeah, we have some online questions. I guess two. So the first question is from Huda Khan. Do you convert between build or B-frame light and FOLIO's internal model, or are your linked data model conversions limited to B-frame to Mark? Thanks. Yeah, I think we support two directions. We can convert from Mark to B-frame and from B-frame to Mark, and I think that's the answer.
I'll just add that the one benefit of the build vocabulary is that mapping it to other vocabularies allows you to project it into what other vocabularies you want. So if you want to output schema.org for discovery, you can. If you want to do it your own extension, you can. If you want to do BibFrame, you can. So there's flexibility by using that as a core transformation.
Will that flexibility be apparent in the user interface, so you can actually see these various?
Yeah, when we get to the point of displaying, correct, yeah, and exporting.
And one more question. Would local fields contained in the Mark record be retained in the B-frame transformation?
Yes.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to accommodate local fields, you know, like 9XX fields, we'll accommodate that in a separate table so that it's preserved. And then on the transformation on the outside, it will be contained in the Mark record.
Yeah, I can also add here, you may get impressions that we can lose Mark information, but we will never lose this information. It's something like one more editor, which will convert into another format, provide some kind of editing capabilities, but at the end of the story, we'll convert everything back to Mark. So we won't lose any data. That's one of our requirements within constraints, because we understand the importance of this data. Yeah.
I think we are like way over. Someone needs to get in here. So thank you for commenting. Lots of space.